every now and then I like to film slightly more chatty videos, and this week's chatty topic is on things that I wish skincare brands would stop doing. And of course, this is just a general opinion video. I don't expect everybody to agree, but I figured I'd go through a few dot points and explain why they might be a little bit problematic. And some of these are honestly just pet peeves, so it's not that serious, but I think it's always just good to have general conversations about the beauty industry, or at least I find it a relatively interesting topic. So let me stop yapping and get straight into the list. And number one is claiming to treat medical conditions. So you're probably already aware, but generally skincare is sort of split into two main categories. So there's the cosmetics lane, and then there's the sort of drug lane. So drugs are there to actually treat medical conditions. This might be like acne, rosacea, melasma. They tend to be the main things that come up. Whereas cosmetics are supposed to just kind of beautify the skin or cleanse the skin. So in their kind of true definition, a general skincare product that we use and buy as a cosmetic isn't technically supposed to have or exert a physiological effect. So you'll already know that. Even I sit here very often talking about ingredients and what they do and how they penetrate the skin and how they boost collagen. A lot of what we discuss actually enters drug territory, which if the FDA or the TGA actually had the resources to care, a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what brands skirt around wouldn't be allowed. And the reason for that is actually important, because if something is properly having a physiological effect, there needs to be like a level of control around those products in terms of, purification and standardization, and just safety for consumers needs to be much more considered. The whole concept of a cosmetic is that it is acting a little bit more on the surface. Where I think it's probably a little bit of a gray area is that as skincare technologies have progressed and we do have a lot of delivery systems, encapsulation and so on, that is bringing these ingredients much further into the skin, it's hard to know how much of an actual effect it's having, and whether it's probably time for the Western markets, so say like US, Australia, UK, Europe, matches what a lot of Asian countries are doing. So Korea, for example, has a functional cosmetic category which sits in between drugs and cosmetics. I think Japan has a quasi-drug category where certain ingredients are recognized as having more efficacy. So in that way, I think a lot of the Western world is quite behind in its categorization, and it's not really fair to either industry. But while we operate in this lane, I think it's important that brands do stick to their lane, because I don't think people generally should rely on cosmetic brands to actually treat melasma, rosacea, or even acne. So often we end up spending hundreds of dollars on serums and that kind of thing, trying to treat conditions that maybe having one visit with a dermatologist, for example, could set you on a path that's just much more plausible, much more relevant in terms of the available evidence. And for me, I'm personally bothered when brands say that they can, cure melasma or treat melasma or, fix rosacea, because those things have a real emotional attachment to them. So I don't think there should be like a sales side into trying to sell people like a huge routine of products when maybe one prescription topical would do much more. And so in that way, there's potential for cosmetic brands that don't follow the rules properly and overclaim, where they're actually then getting in the way of consumers seeking the proper lane and the proper advice. Now, technically with drug claims, even something like talking about cellular damage and boosting collagen and elastin, they would actually all fall under a drug claim category. And if you follow me for a while, you'll know that I love peptides and all that, and all those sort of like exotic ingredients that claim to do a bunch of other stuff. So for me, the idea of like anti-aging and like collagen and elastin and DNA and all of that, that's not too problematic in my view, because I don't consider aging to be a medical condition. It's just a natural part of life. So I don't care about cosmetic brands, tiptoeing around collagen claims and improving lines and wrinkles and so on. I'm more so specifically, personally, and this is just my opinion, not the actual regulation, but I think ensuring that we maintain the difference between what is a treatment for a medical disease or condition should be different to what is available just generally topically at Sephora. A lot of brands do get a little bit defensive in this sense because they might be like, well, I have, clinical evidence or clinical claims or before and afters or whatever. But there is still a big difference between a cosmetic clinical, which is essentially there and is designed to just prove appearance claims. So where a brand can say it's improved the appearance of redness, but that doesn't mean that it's actually treating the underlying cause of rosacea or helping to properly mitigate or manage those issues and symptoms. And it's just much, much more stringent and much harder to be able to make a drug claim because the checks and balances involved are so much more serious. And as I said at the start, that's all done on purpose to ensure consumer protection. So yeah, to wrap that up, I think there is room for an in-between category because I think everybody knows it's like an open secret that there is so much more effort put into skin penetration and actually having ingredients do what they're supposed to do. So it would be useful from a consumer clarity perspective if we knew the ingredients that have reasonable evidence, the ones that probably don't do anything, and the ones that are specifically regulated as drugs. And just to point out, there is a little bit of an in-between category, and that's the OTC field. So often you'll see benzoyl peroxide or salicylic acid. If brands are following a specific monograph in the US, then they can make certain drug claims on acne. So there are some products here and there that kind of sit in this in-between category, but not many things do. And even a lot of dermatologists around on social media use these phrases incorrectly. So many of them will talk about like retinol being an OTC, for example, and retinol is absolutely not OTC. The only recognized OTC is something like adapalene different. And again, these are very confusing lanes and terminology that not even professionals are communicating properly. So I think there's definitely room for improvement in all of this and how it exists to protect consumers, correctly and properly. Now, the next point is a little bit more lighthearted, which is I dislike it when brands launch more than one product at a time. And what I mean by this is I'm sure you've seen like brands do a skincare launch and they might bring out like 6 products at a time. They all have similar packaging, similar sort of star ingredients. But to me, this is very confusing and I never know what is the key product or what is the focus product. Like how does a brand know if this line will even work well for people? How do they know that it will resonate and become popular? So by launching too many products at once, I think it just sort of splits the focus rather than putting a lot of marketing effort and communication and education behind one flagship product. Launching 6 just feels a little bit like a cash grab. And I think we've seen this sort of develop in a way where there's a lot more releases and it feels like everybody's rushing. Nothing feels as special or as significant as it used to. And I think we've all probably noticed that just the stability of products is worse. So in terms of like shelf life, things are not lasting as long. They seem to be splitting and separating much quicker. And just the overall design of products, it seems to be in this like lane of wanting to copy existing textures or copy existing ingredient profiles. Whereas I think the industry as a whole benefits from more originality, more of a slower pace. And it also gives consumers a chance to catch up, a chance to get to know brands and products. So I think in the long run, just doing things slowly is better for everyone. I'm sure you have felt, or we've all noticed, most of us have noticed that there's been a little bit of a slowdown in interest around skincare. And that's just because there was just too much too quickly and it turned into a bit of a frivolous industry. Whereas skincare used to, at least in terms of like its opposition to makeup, it used to be a little bit more of like a long play kind of industry. But that's all gone. And, just having this abundance of products released in these constant cycles is exhausting and distracting. And then I also think it's a bit goofy to have brands sort of focus on these sustainability initiatives where they're having refill systems, for example, but then they're launching a bunch of products at the same time where half of them probably won't even sell that well. So it's all of this manufacturing waste, development waste, just all of that could have been spread across multiple years. And brands could be actually saving money by knowing which lines are worth pursuing and investing. And so all of this, I think, has ultimately just eroded consumer sentiment and consumer trust in brands because things are discontinued as quickly as they're launched. And there's absolutely no time to actually get to know anything or for any product to truly develop a cult following organically the way things used to happen. The next point is also a little bit of a personal pet peeve. It's when brands name a product the same thing in different markets, but are actually using an entirely different formula. So like visibly, it looks like it would be the same thing, but it actually isn't. We live in so much more of a connected world that I don't see why brands would even think they would get away with it. Like I understand they're trying to shortcut marketing because they've spent all this effort building a cult favorite product. But if that's not actually the same, it's like a pointless endeavor. So one recent example was, I think it's the Biore Aqua Rich sunscreen. It came out in the US with very similar packaging to the Asian version, but using entirely different filters, which completely changes the skin feel, dry down, just the whole product is entirely different. And so imagine if you're a consumer, you see this product on the shelf, you've heard all about it on social media, and then you're ultimately disappointed because it has no relationship to the original. It not only confuses consumers again, but it makes it come across like the person originally recommending it somehow doesn't know what they're talking about. Another one would be like the L'Oreal, I think it's the Bright Reveal Niacinamide Serum. Like that contains Melasil in some markets. I don't think it includes Melasil in the US. There's a slightly different composition of niacinamide, and it's like L'Oreal is such a big brand. I'm sure that they could bring that same formula everywhere, and if they can't, then there should be some slight tweaks to naming or packaging so that everybody can identify the variations in the composition easily enough. I recently heard about Aveeno body wash being reformulated in Canada with a much nicer texture, so I went out and bought it here in Australia, but it's again an entirely different formula, so I didn't get what I thought I was buying whatsoever. And I think another good example would be something like Ultraviolet Supreme Screen, which was such a cult favorite sunscreen from Australia. Same formula I think available in Europe, and then it launched in the US. Again, entirely different actives, so as much as the brand claims they did their best to emulate the formula, I think just calling it exactly the same thing is getting into deceptive territory. And the fourth point is sort of similar to what I just spoke about, but I really dislike regional exclusives. So I know that, different countries in the world have certain preferences where maybe the climate influences what people look for and want to buy. So I sort of understand why there'd be development for specific types of products, but I don't understand why at least those same products aren't available, say maybe online. Like what's the harm in, again, L'Oreal stocking one of their Cica toners in the US or Australia? If they don't want to launch it in retail, fine, but just have it be available online. Like that's not a huge ask. And this actually all came about because one of you left me a comment that L'Oreal does actually make a Centella essence that, we just don't have available, and I don't have easy access to it at all. But it sounds like such a lovely hydrating product. I would love to buy it if I could. So there's this whole thing of like brands keep trying to force control or dictate what will be popular or what will resonate. And I guess they often get this information from historical sales data or maybe from focus groups and so on, where they don't want to risk investing in marketing and so on. But with social media, a lot of that marketing happens naturally and organically. So I'm not suggesting that they need to do full marketing rollouts for what they don't think will work in certain countries. But again, just having it available for sale to see what happens, like what is the harm? Next point is around the over-explanation of INCI lists. So this point is related to like Paula's Choice or a Bioma, even Good Molecules, just where they spend so much time trying to break down like what an ingredient does. But the truth is that within cosmetic design, a lot of different ingredients have various different functions. So it's not up to any one individual brand to tell the public what an ingredient is used for, because they can only tell you why they would use an ingredient, not why another brand is using it. So sometimes something is in a formula as an active antioxidant, sometimes it's there to preserve a product or to stabilize a fragrance, or for a number of different reasons. So having brands kind of break down specific percentages or calling something a solvent or an emulsifier or whatever when that's not applicable widely, it ends up just being a confusing thing to do. It's a marketing tactic to make that brand appear more scientific, I guess. So it's almost a level of science washing. And by extension, disclosing every single percentage of every ingredient that's not necessary information. It's not useful. You know, some brands have super simplistic formulas, so them declaring every percentage makes sense because who cares? You know, it's very easy to copy in a very baseline formula. But other brands spend actual years developing what they make, so why do they want to share their exact composition or proprietary information? And in terms of how that actually functions in the skin, knowing percentages often isn't relevant at all. So I think this over explanation of ingredients has definitely allowed some brands to come across more advanced than they are, when often it's the brands that don't talk about that loudly that I think are probably doing the best work. The next point I've already spoken about in a dedicated video about skincare reviews, but I really dislike seeing like thousands of pre-populated reviews. I do understand that, you know, brands are under pressure by many retailers to ensure that there's an abundance of coverage and reviews already in the system when a product launches, but just the amount of product that's being sent out and how much the window of availability in terms of giving people enough time to review something properly is getting shorter and shorter. So these reviews are becoming less and less important and less reliable. So I don't necessarily mind seeing like a handful of reviews go in there early, because I guess I do understand brands want things to appear like there's hype, but I'm not sure that it's necessary to have like thousands go in there, because it also just drowns out some of the more helpful reviews that might be in that mix. And probably within this, the part that frustrates me the most is when a retail website, so say like Sephora or Mecca, when they actually like upload the reviews that are from another website or from the brand's own website. So that's especially unhelpful, because it's like if I'm shopping at Mecca or Sephora, then I'm happy to see reviews that have come from Sephora shoppers or Mecca shoppers, but I don't want to see things that have been pulled from other sources, because then that's extra irrelevant. And the last point on this list, which is truly just a pet peeve of mine, is when brands exclude products from sales, especially if it's like a product they've just released, and say we've got Black Friday coming up and then a brand decides to not include that new release product within the sale period. That's especially frustrating to me, because having it included in the sale might mean that that product has been discounted by $5 or $10. So the brand would rather risk me abandoning my whole cart, which I do because I'm that petty if something is excluded, then just absorb a little bit of an extra discount because I'm excited to try what their new product is. And part of that frustration is brands actually choose when they want to release products. So if they would prefer not to have a new release included in a sale, then wait for that new release and launch it during a non-sale period, or when you know that there's not a sale coming up. I think that's easy to manage expectations that way, rather than this annoying limitation when in reality, in another 2 weeks' time, then that product will be on sale all of the time and everywhere. So just either don't launch it or put it on sale with everything else. Let me build my cart happily. Often I can get over this if it comes from a brand that I know genuinely doesn't run discounts very often, because that is just part of the structure of their brand. But when brands that discount all of the time try and put these limitations on, it's so confusing, because like we all know that you're a brand that discounts. So just let it happen. Anyway, that's the end of this little bit of a chatty, ranty video. Again, this is all meant to be quite light-hearted, just for conversation, so please don't take it too seriously. I'm also not targeting any one brand in particular. I would, however, love to hear your opinions. If you have any pet peeves about skincare shopping, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.